So, now that we've got stuff made, we're ready to cook a batch of crank. Now, there's two alternate ways, actually there's four alternate ways that we can do this here. Depending on whether one has gone through the bother of scraping off the red phosphorus from matchbook striking pads, or if you've produced hypophosphorus acid. Now, hypophosphorus acid, here, this is a product I got from that electroless nickel product after I evaporated off all the ether underneath the vacuum. Once you get it this concentrated, you have to keep it stored in the freezer there until it's ready for use because it will not keep at room temperature. So I just got it out of the freezer. We have two ways to go about this. Using the hypophosphorus acid, these are the proportions. Using red phosphorus, these are the proportions over here for a 10-gram batch. Now there are two alternate routes to actually do this HI and red P or hypophosphorus reduction. A very popular method is the push-pull method. You do it directly in a little flask just like this. Stopper the top, run a line off the side to a couple of milk jugs filled with water. The line going down the bottom. The idea of that is to pressurize the inside of this container just a little bit, or you could just take a tough rubber bulb here and put it on the end here so you'd like blow up a balloon, you know, with a little bit of pressure, not a lot of pressure, but a little bit. The bad thing about that particular method is if you're using hypophosphorus acid, it's very possible to get a fire going. And you'd have to have a sloppy wet towel ready to just throw it on top of the little fire there in order to quench it out. Well, I think it'd be a little bit embarrassing here if I'm filming or I have to start fighting a fire. I can see that one turning up on TV. So, the method we're going to demonstrate here is just the plain old standard cook option, where you boil the solution. See, for the push-pull, you would use the pure concentrated hypophosphorus acid. For the cook version, you dilute the hypophosphorus acid down with a little bit of water and you boil. So, anyway, we're about ready to proceed here. This is that iodine extract there from the iodine tincture. Remember, I kept some of that in a Grolsch beer bottle. These are iodine granules that I got after they dried out when I precipitated them out of the iodine tincture. Now, the amount that you're going to get in solid form versus in the solution form will vary with how strong your iodine tincture is. I used the 7%, and that gave me roughly 90% of the iodine in this rock form, which is much simpler and easier to weigh out, and the other 10% in the solution. Now, if you use weaker tinctures, like say if you get down to like 2% iodine tincture, the majority is going to be recovered in your toluene extract, and you'll just get a little bit of actual solid iodine. You go down to 1% iodine tincture, which is really a joke, all of the iodine you're going to recover will be in the extract. So to begin here, you start. Let's measure out our 12 mLs of hypophosphorus acid. Notice it's kind of thick. Yeah, it's about 12 mLs. In she goes. Now, I'll dilute this hypophosphorus acid here with 25 mLs of water. There we go. And another portion. And we can commence. It'll clear up once it's all dissolved in. This toluene extract here. How would you get the two of them to react? Well, it's not very difficult at all. Let's get something on the eyeballs here to protect things. But they react together just fine. Let's take some out. Little iodine extract there and toluene. Alright. Now to get them to react, you'd have to stir them. And that's with 1 minute of stirring in. See how much lighter it is already? It's reacting along nicely. Give it 1 minute. And now with 2 minutes of stirring in, all of the iodine has reacted. So we'll turn off the stir and let it separate. So on top floats the toluene that used to contain the iodine. And on the bottom is a solution of hydroiodic acid. Of course, there's nowhere near enough in there to do the reaction yet, but I was just showing you how to use the toluene extract. We don't have to use a lot of toluene extract in order to get the required 25 grams into there. That was just a start. That was just to show you how to do it using that extract with toluene. Now we'll move on to using the little chunks of iodine there that I accumulated from the tincture. And you just add them to it. Slowly, a bit at a time, they react. Now, if this is red phosphorus, it's going to react much more violently. And it gets very, very hot. But hypophosphorus acid reacts a little bit more slowly with iodine, and not quite so forcefully. And you don't really need to stir it. It will eventually react on its own, but stirring speeds things along. That took about 10 minutes for the iodine to react with the hypophosphorus acid and get into a solution, make HI with a fair amount of leftover hypophosphorus acid still in the solution there to act like a red P. Need that extra hypophosphorus acid in order to make the reaction go, because the solution will continually break down and produce iodine. That's why it's got a slight tint of yellow to it. It'll continually break down to make iodine. You need that hypophosphorus acid there to recycle it back to HI. So, it didn't even get particularly warm. It got warm, but not hot. If this was red P I was using instead of hypophosphorus acid, this would have become boiling hot, and you'd have to have done the reaction in this little round bottom flask, which we're going to use right here as our reaction flask to make the crank. So in she goes. Ooh, and there goes my stir bar. Yeah. 10 grams ephedrine hydrochloride. You can use pseudoephedrine hydrochloride just as well. Ephedrine is a little bit preferable, and I've always liked it. And you'll note there's no real obvious reaction as they mix, as the ephedrine goes into the acid there. It doesn't dissolve completely either until it gets hot. So now we're ready to cook. So anyway, this is the cooking apparatus. I have a condenser attached to the top of that round bottom flask. And from the sink, we have inlet water coming in at the bottom, cold water to flow through the condenser, and out the top of the condenser, the water exits in order to keep the condenser cool. And it's about time to start cooking this. You can see on the bottom the ephedrine hydrochloride still is not dissolved completely, but it will as soon as I start to heat it. Keep the fumes inside as it boils. We have boiling just beginning. Oops. In the solution will be in a little bit here. And you'll let it boil like this for roughly 12 hours at roughly that pace. Now I know what you're going to say. I don't have that round bottom flask or condenser. I can't get chemical glassware that's sophisticated like that. Not down at the local stores anyway. And I don't want to make myself a target by doing suspicious things. That's good thinking. You can get flasks like this at the local hobby shop. Goes a nice long neck on it. The longer neck, the better. You want to get a flask that's made out of Pyrex or Chimex. Then you could do exactly the same boil I have going with that ephedrine right there. And a flask like this, if you take some copper tubing and you just wrap it around the outside, starting at, right about at that point right there, you know, and you'd have the solution boiling way down here, you know. Start wrapping it with copper tubing. Don't bother with plastic tubing. It doesn't transfer heat well enough. Copper tubing. Wrap it around and around and around and around to get to the top, and then, you hook a water line at the top there and discharge the cold water. This will cool down the outside of the flask up here and will act like a condenser for you, as long as you don't boil too fast on it. You don't need that big fast boil. Mixture for at least 12 hours here. You notice it's developed a bit of a golden color to it. Now, if I was using red phosphorus, the mixture would still look very red and messy looking, and what I'd have to do is filter the mixture through doubled up coffee filters to filter out the red phosphorus, and then you get a golden colored mixture like that. Now that I've got it this far, it's time for me to collect my product. Now to do that, I have to neutralize all the HI, all the acid inside this mixture here with Red Devil Lye. Already mixed up in solution. This is about 20% by weight. Red Devil Lye in water. I've allowed that to cool down because when they react, things can get a little bit exciting. So I take my product over here.